They say that silence speaks louder than words. But what happens when your silence isn't just quiet, it's deafening? Do they feel it? Do they notice? Or do they move on like nothing ever happened? Before we dive into this life-changing truth, take a moment to hit that like button. Not for me, but for yourself. Because by the end of this, you'll have a new perspective, and you'll wish you'd heard this sooner. Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're addressing the burning question that keeps so many of us awake at night. If I stop caring, will they even notice? Let's not sugarcoat it. This question doesn't come from a place of strength. It comes from fear. Fear that we've invested so much of ourselves into someone who doesn't even look back when we step away. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're giving and giving until there's nothing left of you? You wake up thinking about them. You go to bed wondering if they thought about you. And somewhere in the middle, you forget to think about yourself. It's like running on a treadmill, chasing after someone who doesn't even realize you're running. Picture this. You're shouting into a canyon, waiting to hear the echo of your own voice. But the only thing you hear is silence. And the more you shout, the more desperate you feel, until eventually your voice fades into the void. That's what happens when you care too much. You're left shouting into emptiness, hoping for a response that never comes. And let me be real. What did our wise friend once said? He said, "To love someone at the expense of losing yourself is not love. It's self-betrayal." And here's the hard truth. Look at you. Don't lie to yourself. How many times have you sacrificed your peace, your dignity, and your self-worth for someone who didn't even notice? How many times have you sat there staring at your phone, waiting for a message, a call, some kind of sign that you mattered to them? But deep down, you know the answer. You know that the more you care, the less they notice. The more you chase, the further they pull away. And here's where it hits hard. This isn't about them. It's about you. What has all this caring done to you? Look at yourself, not just in the mirror, but really look inside. When was the last time you put yourself first? When was the last time you felt strong, confident, and in control? You're not here by accident. You're here because you're tired of feeling invisible. You're tired of giving so much and getting so little in return. And let me tell you, it's time to stop. It's time to change the game. This isn't about being cold or heartless. It's about being smart. It's about finally understanding that your worth isn't measured by how much you bend, chase, or give. It's measured by how much you respect yourself. And as for the answer to whether they'll notice or not, ask yourself this: why does it even matter if they do? But don't worry, we'll uncover the truth soon enough. Stay with me. So let's start with our affirmation. Because this is where I want you to stand, tall, unshaken, and fully respecting your self-worth. So take a deep breath and write this in the comments below to let me know you're with me. Simply write, "I choose me." Yes, go ahead and type this out quickly. I choose me. Write it, declare it, own it. Let those 3 words be your first step toward reclaiming your power and stepping into the life you deserve. And stay with me, because what's coming next is even more important. We're going to break down exactly what happens when you stop caring, why they notice, how it changes the dynamic, and most importantly, how it transforms you. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Number 1, the paradox of attention. Absence sharpens love. Presence strengthens it. The moment you stop caring too much, something unexpected happens. People notice, but not in the way you might think. It's not instant, and it's not always obvious. It's subtle, like the first hint of dawn breaking through the night. Why does this happen? Because attention, like everything else in life, follows the law of supply and demand. When you're always available, always giving, always present, your attention becomes predictable. It loses value. But when you pull back, even just a little, you create scarcity. And scarcity, it breeds curiosity, wonder, even longing. Suddenly, they're left with a void, and voids demand to be filled. Here's the paradox. The harder you try to prove your value by giving and giving, the less they see it. But the moment you stop, the moment you redirect that energy inward, the dynamic begins to shift. They start to wonder, why aren't they texting me like they used to? Why don't they seem as invested? And it's in that wonder that the magic happens. Think of a stage. When the spotlight is always shining on one actor, you stop noticing the brilliance of their performance. But when the light fades for a moment, when they step into the shadows, you suddenly lean forward, craving to see them again. That's what happens when you stop caring too much. You step out of the constant spotlight, and suddenly they're left squinting into the dark, trying to find you. But let's not sugarcoat this. It's not just about creating mystery, it's about creating balance. When you stop over-investing in someone else, you reclaim that energy for yourself. You stop filling every silence with your words, every pause with your effort, every doubt with your reassurance. And that's when they notice, not because you're playing a game, but because you're finally valuing yourself. Absence doesn't just make the heart grow fonder, it forces the mind to reflect. Let me ask you this. Have you ever seen someone pull away from you and suddenly they're all you can think about? You replay conversations, read into their last text, and wonder where things went wrong. Now flip that script. When you stop caring too much, that's exactly what happens to them. Here's a real-life example. Think about a friend who was always there for you. Maybe they checked in daily, asked about your life, or went out of their way to make plans. At some point, you started expecting it. You didn't think twice about their effort, because it was always there. But the day they stopped, that's when you noticed. That's when you started wondering why they pulled back, why things felt different. Their absence made their presence unforgettable. The same thing happens in relationships. When you're always the one initiating, always the one caring, your energy becomes background noise. But the moment you stop, it's like someone hit the mute button in a crowded room. Suddenly, the silence is louder than anything you could have said. But isn't pulling back manipulative? This is the fear that creeps into your mind, isn't it? Let me tell you, no, it's not. This isn't about playing games or being cold. It's about recognizing your worth. It's about understanding that relationships, at their healthiest, are built on balance. And balance means that both people should have the space to give, to take, and to reflect. If you're always the one pouring from your cup, who's refilling yours? Let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're holding a rare, beautiful flower. If you overwater it, smother it, and never let it breathe, what happens? It wilts. But when you give it space, just the right amount of sun, water, and care, it thrives. Relationships are no different. Space doesn't kill them, it nurtures them. The fear of pulling back often stems from a deeper question. What if they don't notice? What if they never care? This is where it gets uncomfortable, because yes, there's a chance they won't. And that's when you need to face the truth. If your absence doesn't make them notice, then your presence was never truly appreciated. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's one you need to face to grow. Because here's the thing, this isn't just about making them notice. It's about you noticing yourself. It's about asking yourself why their opinion matters so much, why you've allowed their validation to dictate your self-worth, why you've poured so much of yourself into someone who may not have earned it. To love yourself is to realize you are not the one chasing, you are the one deserving. Let me tell you another story. Imagine a person who's been chasing a butterfly. They run through the fields, arms outstretched, desperate to catch it, but the butterfly flutters just out of reach. Exhausted, they finally stop and sit down. And do you know what happens? The butterfly lands on their shoulder. That's the paradox of attention. The more you chase, the further it flees. But the moment you stop, the world starts noticing you. This is what happens when you stop caring too much. You stop chasing. You stop running yourself ragged, trying to prove your worth. And in that stillness, in that self-respect, you create a magnetic energy. The people who truly value you will gravitate toward it, and the ones who don't, let them fly away. But here's where the real magic lies. When you stop caring too much, you don't just change the way they see you. You change the way you see you. You start realizing that your energy is precious, that your attention is a gift, and that not everyone deserves it. You stop defining yourself by someone else's reaction and start defining yourself by your own standards. So, let's make this clear. This isn't about pulling back to make them chase you. It's about stepping back to see if they were ever walking beside you in the first place. It's about understanding that your value doesn't decrease because someone else failed to see it. It's about owning your worth unapologetically. Take a deep breath and let this sink in. Your worth is not in their hands. It never was. Now, let's end this with a declaration. I want you to type this in the comments right now. I am the prize. Say it, write it, believe it. Because when you know your value, when you stand tall in your worth, everything else starts to fall into place. Stay with me. What's coming next is going to change the way you see everything. And if at this point you have any questions, throw them out in the comments. I'm here to hear you out. And if everything is clear and you're enjoying the content, make sure to press that like button under this video. Your support means the world and helps us keep creating content like this just for you. Number 2. Why do they start noticing? Remember that one friend who used to check in on you every single day? They'd send that, "Hey, how are you?" text, remember your favorite things, and always be there to make plans. You didn't have to think about them much, did you? Their effort became part of your routine. Predictable, almost invisible. But then, one day, they stopped reaching out. Suddenly, you find yourself scrolling through your messages, rereading old texts and wondering, are they okay? Did I do something wrong? That feeling, that sudden shift in awareness, that's exactly what happens in relationships when you stop caring too much. When you step back, you create space. And in that space, something powerful begins to stir. They notice. It's human nature. We don't value what's always there. We don't stop to admire the air we breathe until it's gone. But take it away, even for a moment, and we crave it. We question its absence. That's the paradox. You're more noticed in your absence than in your constant presence. Now, imagine this. You're in a room filled with music. It's playing softly in the background, blending into the rhythm of your day. But the moment the music stops, the silence is deafening. It's not the music itself you notice, it's the lack of it. That's what happens when you withdraw your energy. Your silence becomes louder than your words ever were. It's like an echo in their mind, forcing them to pay attention. But why? Why do they start noticing only when you pull back? It's simple. Attention thrives on scarcity. When something is abundant, it fades into the background. But when it's rare, it becomes desirable. Your attention is no different. When you're always available, always pouring your energy into them, they stop seeing it as a gift. It becomes an expectation. But when you pull back, even slightly, you disrupt that pattern. Suddenly, they're left wondering why the energy they took for granted is no longer there. Let's break it down further with another example. Think of a favorite piece of jewelry, a watch, a necklace, or a bracelet. When you wear it every day, it becomes a part of you. You don't notice it anymore, it's just there. But take it off for a while and you'll catch yourself glancing at your wrist or reaching for your neck, feeling its absence. That's how people feel when your consistent energy, your constant care, is suddenly gone. But let's address the fear that creeps in. What if they don't notice? What if my absence doesn't matter to them at all? Here's the truth, and it might sting a little. If they don't notice, that tells you everything you need to know. If your absence doesn't stir something within them, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inability to appreciate you. And honestly, would you want someone like that in your life? Someone who can't see the value of your presence, even when it's gone? Sometimes, it's not that they don't care. It's that you've cared so much for so long that they've forgotten how to care back. This isn't about manipulating someone into valuing you. It's about resetting the dynamic. Relationships are healthiest when both people contribute, when the energy is mutual. If you've been overextending yourself, stepping back isn't about punishment. It's about creating balance. You're giving them the opportunity to reflect, to appreciate, and to meet you halfway. And here's where the power lies. Whether they notice or not, you're winning. Because when you stop over-caring, you reclaim all that energy for yourself. You stop tying your worth to their reactions, and you start building something more important: your own confidence, your own peace, your own happiness. Think of the ocean tide. It comes in and out, creating space for reflection and renewal. When you stop caring too much, you're not walking away entirely. You're just stepping back, allowing the tide to recede. And in that pause, they'll notice the change. They'll feel the shift. But here's what I want you to remember. Whether they notice or not doesn't define you. Your value isn't in their hands. It never was. Let's end this with a declaration. I want you to type this in the comments right now. I am enough. Say it, write it, believe it. Because whether they notice or not, you are more than enough. And that's a truth no one can take away from you. Stay with me. We're just getting started. The next part will show you how this shift changes not just them, but you. Number 3. Does it always work? The truth revealed. So folks, this is a question that eats away at so many of us. Does it really work? When you stop caring, will they notice? Or are you just setting yourself up for more disappointment? Let's call out the big gun. The Stoic legend Marcus Aurelius, who once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good person should be. Be one." This isn't about trying to force someone to see your value. It's about being the kind of person who recognizes their own worth, regardless of whether others notice. But here's the good news. In most cases, it does work. They do notice when you step back. And there's a reason for that, one rooted not in tricks or manipulation, but in the natural flow of human behavior. When you've been giving endlessly, your time, your attention, your care, it becomes something the other person expects. Your effort fades into the background like sunlight on a bright day. It's warm, it's comforting, but it's easy to take for granted. When you stop, though, when you step back and allow your absence to create space, it's like a storm cloud suddenly covering the sun. The warmth they didn't even realize they were basking in is gone, and that's when they feel it. This happens in most cases because people are wired to respond to shifts in dynamics. Imagine this. You're walking through a beautiful garden, surrounded by flowers, their fragrance filling the air. At first, you're captivated, noticing every petal, every vibrant color. But as you keep walking, you stop noticing. The beauty is still there, but it's become part of the scenery. Now imagine you leave that garden and step into a barren desert. Suddenly, you're longing for the lushness you didn't even appreciate before. That's how human attention works. People notice contrast. They notice absence. And yes, in most cases, when you stop caring excessively, they will notice. It's not just about scarcity, it's about the energy shift. When someone who's been pouring themselves into a relationship suddenly steps back, it creates an imbalance. That imbalance forces the other person to take stock, to reflect on what they've lost, even if they didn't realize they had it in the first place. But let's address the skeptics, because I hear you. You're wondering, what if they don't notice? What if I step back and nothing changes? That's a valid fear, and here's the hard truth. In some rare cases, they won't notice. They won't care. And that can feel like a punch to the gut. But ask yourself this. Do you really want someone in your life who only sees your value when you're bending over backward for them? If they don't notice your absence, they were never truly connected to your presence. And while that realization may hurt, it's also a gift. It frees you from wasting more time on someone who doesn't deserve your energy. In most cases, though, they will notice. Why? Because relationships at their core are about balance. When you've been overgiving, overcaring, you're essentially tipping the scales in their favor. They're used to the dynamic of you always being there, always reaching out. When you step back, it disrupts that balance. It forces them to reevaluate. Why aren't they calling me like they used to? Did I do something wrong? Are they moving on? These questions start to creep into their mind, and that's when they begin to feel the weight of your absence. Here's a real-life example. Imagine a friend who always texts you first, who always initiates plans, who's always checking in on you. Over time, you come to expect it. You don't think much about their effort because it's always there. But the moment they stop, you start scrolling through your old messages, wondering why they've gone quiet. That's human nature. We don't value what's abundant, but we crave what feels rare. And this isn't about manipulation. Let me make that clear. You're not stepping back to play games or make them chase you. You're stepping back to restore balance, to give yourself the respect you deserve, and to allow the other person the chance to reflect. When you're always giving, there's no room for the other person to show up for you. But when you pull back, you create that space. It's like this. Imagine you're holding a tightly coiled spring. The more pressure you apply, the more resistance you feel. But the moment you release that pressure, the spring expands, moving naturally toward balance. That's what happens when you stop caring too much. You release the pressure, and suddenly the dynamic has room to shift. And let's be honest, stepping back can be scary. You're afraid of what you might lose. You're afraid they won't notice, or worse, that they won't care. But here's where the Stoic perspective comes in. You cannot control how others respond to your absence. You can only control your own actions. And when you act from a place of self-respect, you've already won. Most people will notice because humans are wired to respond to change. When the pattern of your constant attention is broken, It stands out. It leaves a void. And in that void, they're forced to confront what they've been taking for granted. But even if they don't, your choice to step back isn't about them. It's about you. So here's the truth. In the majority of cases, when you stop caring too much, they will notice. And if they don't, it's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their inability to see it. Either way, you come out stronger, wiser, and more in tune with yourself. Let's end this with a powerful affirmation. Take a deep breath and write this in the comments. I am enough. Declare it, own it, and believe it. Because no matter how they respond, your worth has never been up for debate. Stay with me. We're only scratching the surface, and what's coming next will give you even more clarity. Number 4, the psychology behind it. The mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell, a hell of heaven. Let's dive into the psychology behind it, the intricate dance between caring too much and stepping back. Because here's the truth. What happens in their mind when you pull away is as fascinating as what happens in your own. This isn't just about them, it's about you too. Our minds are wired to seek balance and avoid uncertainty. When you're always present, always giving, you create a sense of predictability. Your presence becomes their comfort zone, something they assume will always be there. But the moment you pull back, the dynamic shifts. Their mind starts racing to fill the gaps. Why aren't they texting me like they used to? Did I do something wrong? Have they moved on? These aren't random thoughts. They're their brain's way of processing the imbalance. It's human nature to crave what we don't have and to question what we once took for granted. This is known as the scarcity principle, a concept rooted deeply in psychology. People value things that are rare or difficult to obtain. When your attention was abundant, it felt easy to overlook. But when it's scarce, it becomes something they yearn for. Think of it like an empty chair at the dinner table. When everyone's seated, you don't notice the chair. It's just there, blending in. But if someone suddenly gets up and leaves, that empty seat draws your attention. It stands out. That's exactly what happens when you withdraw your energy. Your absence becomes the loudest presence in the room. But let's flip the script for a moment and talk about what happens in your mind when you decide to step back. Because let's be real, this isn't easy. The moment you pull away, your brain will start playing tricks on you. It'll whisper doubts, scream fears, and try to pull you back into the old patterns of overcaring. What if they don't notice? What if they move on? Did I make a mistake? Your mind, conditioned by habit, will try to convince you to reach out, to check in, to make sure they're okay. This is the tug of war between your rational self and your emotional self. Your rational self knows why you're stepping back, to reclaim your power, to restore balance, to stop chasing. But your emotional self? It's clinging to the comfort of the familiar, even if that familiarity has been draining you. Here's where you need to remind yourself of this simple truth. Growth happens in discomfort. Yes, your mind will protest. It'll try to convince you to break the silence, to undo the progress you've made. But that's just fear talking. Fear of change. Fear of losing control. Fear of being forgotten. The mind is a masterful storyteller, but not every story it tells is true. Now, let's talk about why this psychological shift works in most cases. When you stop caring excessively, you're disrupting the emotional equilibrium. They've become accustomed to the pattern of you always being there, always initiating, always giving. When you pull back, it's like pulling a rug out from under them. Their mind, which thrives on patterns, scrambles to make sense of the change. They might replay old conversations, analyze your last interaction, or even start questioning their own actions. This isn't manipulation, it's human psychology at work. People are naturally drawn to mystery, to things they can't fully understand. By stepping back, you're creating space for them to miss you, to notice what they've been taking for granted. But here's the key. This isn't about creating scarcity for the sake of attention. It's about protecting your energy and breaking unhealthy patterns. Their reaction is secondary. The primary goal is for you to feel empowered, not drained. Let me share a metaphor. Imagine you're holding a handful of sand. If you grip it too tightly, the sand slips through your fingers. But if you hold it gently, with just the right amount of pressure, it stays. That's how relationships work. When you hold on too tightly, when you care too much, you lose the balance. But when you loosen your grip, you create space for the relationship to breathe. But again, your mind will resist. It'll tell you, this won't work. You'll lose them. They'll forget you. And here's where you need to pause and ask yourself, if someone forgets me because I stopped over-caring, were they really worth holding on to? The psychology behind this shift is also about creating reflection, not just for them, but for you. When you step back, you're not just giving them space to think. You're giving yourself the chance to see the situation clearly. You're breaking free from the cycle of overthinking and overgiving. Think of it like stepping away from a painting. When you're too close, you can only see the brush strokes, the imperfections. But when you take a step back, the whole picture comes into focus. That's what happens when you stop caring too much. You're no longer lost in the details. You're seeing the relationship for what it truly is. So, here's what I want you to remember. Your mind will try to convince you that pulling back is a mistake. It'll tempt you to return to the old patterns. But every time you feel that pull, remind yourself why you're doing this. This isn't about manipulating someone into caring. It's about recognizing your own value and giving yourself the respect you deserve. Let's end this with an affirmation to anchor you in your power. Write this in the comments below. I trust myself. Say it, believe it, and hold on to it. Because trusting yourself is the first step to breaking free from the doubts your mind creates. Stay with me. The journey isn't over, and what's coming next will bring even more clarity. Number 5. How to stop caring the right way. This is what makes all the difference. The balance, the sweet spot between caring and losing yourself, between giving and overextending, between love and self-respect. Here's the thing. Stopping caring doesn't mean you need to shut off your emotions, act indifferent, or start playing games. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about something far more powerful. It's about redirecting your energy inward. It's about learning to care in a way that doesn't drain you but builds you up. Think of it like holding a lantern. If you keep handing out your light to everyone around you, soon you'll be left in the dark. But if you take the time to nurture your flame, to protect it, your light will burn brighter, not just for yourself, but for anyone worthy enough to share it. The first step in learning how to stop caring too much is to set boundaries. And yes, I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but let me break it down for you. Boundaries are simply limits. They're a way of saying, this is how far I'm willing to go and no further. Boundaries aren't about punishing anyone or keeping them at arm's length. They're about protecting your peace. Imagine a beautiful garden. Without a fence, anyone can wander in, trample your flowers, and leave without a second thought. But when you build a fence, not to keep people out, but to create a clear path, you're letting them know, respect this space, and it will flourish. That's what boundaries do for your emotional energy. They tell others and yourself that your care is valuable and it shouldn't be taken for granted. Decide how much you're willing to give without losing yourself. For example, if you're always the one initiating contact, step back and let them reach out first. If you're constantly overthinking their actions, remind yourself that their behavior is not your responsibility. Boundaries are where you draw the line between loving someone and forgetting to love yourself. But boundaries alone aren't enough. You also need to focus on your growth. This is where the magic happens, because the energy you once poured into someone else can now be redirected toward building your life. Think of all the time and effort you've spent chasing their validation, worrying about their opinions, or overanalyzing their actions. What if you used that same energy to build the life you've always wanted? Start small. Take up a new hobby that excites you. Hit the gym and watch as your physical strength mirrors your emotional strength. Dive into a passion project that lights a fire in you. Whatever it is, make it about you. Not about impressing anyone else, not about proving your worth, just about rediscovering what makes you you. Here's a little secret. When you focus on your growth, you naturally become more attractive. Not just to them, but to everyone around you. Why? Because confidence, independence, and passion are magnetic. People are drawn to those who don't rely on others for their happiness, but create their own joy. And here's the big one. You need to reclaim your power. This might sound abstract, but it's actually quite simple. Reclaiming your power means remembering that your worth isn't tied to someone else's validation. It means realizing that no one's attention, approval, or love can define who you are. You define that for yourself. Let's flip the narrative for a moment. Instead of asking, "Why aren't they texting me back?" try asking, "Why am I so worried about someone who doesn't prioritize me?" Instead of wondering, "What if they don't care about me anymore?" ask yourself, "Why do I care about someone who doesn't show the same effort?" This shift isn't about blaming them. It's about taking responsibility for how you allow others to treat you. Reclaiming your power means saying, "I am the one who decides my worth. I don't need their approval to feel whole." And here's the irony. When you stop looking for validation from others, that's when people start noticing you. Because a person who knows their own worth is unforgettable. But let's address the fear that creeps in. When you start pulling back, your mind will inevitably ask, "Am I being too distant? Will they think I don't care?" This fear is natural, but it's also a lie. You're not being distant. You're being intentional. You're choosing to care in a way that doesn't compromise your peace. And let's be clear, stopping caring doesn't mean you stop loving or valuing someone. It means you stop carrying the weight of the relationship all by yourself. It means you give them the space to step up, to show their care, to meet you halfway. Because a one-sided relationship isn't a relationship, it's an emotional drain. So here's what I want you to do. Take a deep breath and repeat this affirmation. I choose to focus on my growth. I don't need anyone's approval to feel whole. Number 6. What happens next? The complete picture. What we do now echoes in eternity. Let's talk about the journey. What happens after you stop caring too much? Because it doesn't all happen at once, and the process is anything but linear. At first, it might feel like nothing's changed. You pull back, stop initiating, stop overgiving, and for a while the silence is deafening. They don't call, they don't text, they don't even seem to notice. And in those moments, doubt creeps in. Your mind starts whispering, what if they never notice? What if this was all for nothing? What if they've already moved on? And here's the kicker. This is where most people falter. They break the silence. They reach out, trying to bridge the gap, trying to make sure everything is still okay. But let me tell you something. Growth lives in the discomfort. Those early moments, when it feels like nothing is happening, are the most crucial. Think of it like planting a seed. You bury it in the soil, water it, and wait. For days, maybe even weeks, there's no visible sign of growth. But beneath the surface, everything is happening. The roots are forming, the seed is germinating, and the foundation for something beautiful is taking shape. That's what's happening here. Just because you can't see the results yet doesn't mean the shift isn't happening. At first, they might not notice because they're still stuck in the pattern they've grown accustomed to. Your attention was always there, so they assume it still will be, even if you've stopped giving it. They might not even register your absence right away because they haven't felt the loss yet. But here's where the shift begins. As days turn into weeks, they start to feel it. The silence, the lack of your energy, the space you've created, it begins to sink in. Imagine walking into a room where a candle always burns. You're so used to its glow that you stop noticing it. But when the flame goes out, the darkness feels overwhelming. That's the moment they start to notice. It's not the flame itself they miss. It's the absence of its warmth, the way it made the room feel alive. They might not admit it right away. Most people won't text you and say, "Hey, I miss you," or "Why haven't I heard from you?" Instead, their behavior will shift in subtle ways. Maybe they start liking your old social media posts, commenting on things they used to ignore, or finding excuses to reach out. A vague, "Hey, how have you been?" or a comment on something irrelevant is often their way of testing the waters. At this point, your mind will want to jump in. It'll say, "See, they noticed, it's working," and that's where you need to stay grounded. Because if you rush back into old patterns, if you respond too quickly, give too much, or fall back into overcaring, you risk undoing all the progress you've made. Remember, the goal here isn't to make them notice. The goal is to reset the balance and reclaim your own energy. Here's where the dynamic starts to shift. They'll begin to question things. Why haven't I heard from them? Are they upset? Have they moved on? And it's in that uncertainty that they start to reflect, not just on you, but on their own behavior. Your absence creates a mirror that forces them to see what they've been taking for granted. Think of it like a game of tug-of-war. When you're pulling with all your strength, they're resisting just as hard. But the moment you let go, their momentum shifts. They're left standing there, holding the rope, wondering what happened. That's the power of stepping back. This isn't just about making them miss you, it's about giving them the space to step up. When you stop filling the gaps, you create an opportunity for them to show their effort. Maybe they start reaching out more. Maybe they initiate plans or ask questions they never did before. This is the test. Are they willing to meet you halfway? Are they willing to invest in the relationship the way you always have? But here's the reality. Not everyone will. And that's okay. Some people won't step up because they've grown too comfortable with the dynamic of you doing all the work. They might not even know how to show care because they've never had to. And while that can be painful, it's also freeing. Because when someone doesn't value your presence, their absence will bring you peace. Let me share a real-life example. A friend of mine was always the one chasing after her partner. She planned the dates, made the calls, and checked in constantly. One day, she decided to stop. She didn't announce it, didn't make a scene. She just stopped overgiving. At first, nothing happened. Her partner didn't notice, but after a week, he started asking, "Why haven't I heard from you? Are you okay?" She calmly explained that she wanted to see if he'd meet her halfway. to see if he cared enough to reach out first. That conversation shifted everything. He realized how much he'd been taking her for granted, and for the first time, he started putting in the effort. Their relationship became more balanced, more mutual. But sometimes, the story goes the other way. Another friend stopped chasing someone who wasn't responding to her energy. Weeks went by, and there was no response. Instead of feeling rejected, she felt liberated. She realized she'd been pouring herself into someone who wasn't capable of giving back. And in that realization, she found the strength to move on. The final stage of this journey is clarity. Whether they notice or not, whether they step up or fade away, you're left with one undeniable truth. You didn't need them to validate your worth. This journey isn't about them, it's about you. It's about proving to yourself that you can prioritize your own happiness, that you can step back without fear, and that your energy is too precious to be wasted on someone who doesn't value it. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. That's what the Stoic philosopher Seneca said, and it's true here. The fear of losing them, the fear of their indifference, the fear of being alone, it's all in your mind. When you let go of that fear, you free yourself to live authentically. Let's end this with an affirmation to anchor you in your power. Write this in the comments. I deserve balance. Say it, believe it, and own it. Because whether they notice or not, the balance you create will transform not just your relationships, but your entire life. Stay with me. This journey is far from over, and what's coming next will take you even deeper into your own power. So, let's bring it all together. When you stop caring too much, you shift the balance. Not just in the relationship, but within yourself. They might notice, they might not, but the real transformation happens in you. You reclaim your energy, your confidence, and your self-worth. This isn't about manipulation. It's about living authentically and protecting your peace. Now, here's your next step. Type, I choose me, in the comments to declare your power. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more insights, and share it with someone who needs this reminder. Stay strong, stay balanced, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, write it in the comments below. Say it out loud if you need to. Declare it to yourself, because this is where your power begins. When you focus on your growth, when you set boundaries, when you reclaim your worth, you're not just changing the relationship, you're changing you. And that's the most powerful transformation of all. Stay with me, because what's coming next will take this to an even deeper level.